Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. Let me ask you a question. Did Code Geass's chess scene in the Chinese Federation bother you? Because it didn't bother me, and I was kind of surprised to learn that it did bother so many people. Of course, when I typically hear complaints about the more outlandish moments of Code Geass, usually the major point is Lelouch's poorly timed joke as the apex of plot convenience. But Schneisel's illegal move in the second season, on top of all the other questionable chess moments in that sequence, definitely ruffled some feathers. And that left me wondering, why? Why was this scene constructed this way? Why didn't I care when others haven't let it go years later? And what does this say about how artistic license in fictional series interacts with elements that have real-world equivalents? The first of those questions has a pretty clear answer. The team behind Code Geass valued the thematic and symbolic effect of the chess game over the actual rules and logic behind it. From the first scene of the show, elements of chess had been used as motifs to inform us about characters. The Black King chess piece representing Lelouch, and from the way that he assigns designations to the resistance group, pawns, rooks, all the way up to his ace, Colin, who's noted as the Queen. But even then, she's still just a piece that he's moving around the board. At least at the start of the show. It's useful shorthand for telling us how strategically gifted Lelouch is, serves as a cool design in his Zero outfit, and how he views those around him as tools to achieve his desires. Hell, at the beginning of R2 when he's forgotten his past, he uses white in his match against the noble, and even refers to him as Black King, proving that he's completely divorced from Zero. One of the only times that we actually get to see Lelouch play more than a single move in an actual chess match, though, is against Schneisel in the Chinese Federation. And honestly, that fact alone should key you in that Code Geass is more interested in using the language of chess for motific purposes, as opposed to actually showing competency regarding the game itself. But if you had any doubts, this match certainly puts them away. For context, Lelouch as Zero challenges Schneisel to this chess match in an attempt to secure the ability to use his Geass on all the guests at this reception. Schneisel accepts since if he wins, he'll obtain Zero's identity. Those are the stakes placed on this, and frankly the show wastes no time in jumping to the conclusion, with only a few lines of banter in between observers before we get to Zero's stated political philosophy. Schneisel acknowledges the sentiment and does the same. This speaks to a kind of kinship between the brothers, certainly in how similar they are, and continues to establish them as foils. It also becomes a key point of contrast, as even though Schneisel does genuinely believe that a king must lead, for example, he's frustrated with his father's focus on the ruins as opposed to the state of the empire, he doesn't take it to the logical endpoint that Lelouch does, focused on maintaining the present as opposed to leading into the future, the thematic conflict at the end of the series. But these king plays are just set up for the move that gets under people's skin, which is when Schneisel, instead of accepting a draw, more on why that's fake in a second, makes an illegal move by placing his king in front of Lelouch's, declaring checkmate, his own. Having the win handed to him on a silver platter, Lelouch immediately focuses on how if he takes the king, he'll have fallen into Schneisel's plan and how he'll be humiliated by that, choosing to withdraw his king behind one of his pawns. Schneisel states that the Emperor would have taken the win with no hesitation and that he's learned something about Zero because of this. And before we can learn how Lelouch would respond to that, he almost gets knifed by Nina, ending the scene. So thematically, there's a ton to unpack there. Remember, if Lelouch had won, he would have basically achieved total victory by being able to use the power of kings on everyone there. But instead, he gets so caught up in the small stuff, specifically his pride getting in the way of his larger ambition, that he fails to grasp it. Something that the Emperor would never do, as confirmed by Schneisel being the primary lesson. In a larger sense, by moving the king behind his pawn, Lelouch indicates that when he's feeling behind the 8-ball, he'll hide behind his subordinates and even place them in dangerous situations, which basically happened at the end of Season 1 and again happens later in Season 2. We also learn that Schneisel may be a superior strategist to Lelouch, since while not a total victory, he did gain something towards his end goal, learning another bit about who Zero is as a person, all the while fighting Lelouch to a draw when the only person who could beat Lelouch in chess to this point was someone who could read his mind. And finally, that move reveals a healthy amount about Schneisel as a person. Choosing a decisive moment as opposed to playing it out to a draw indicates the kind of commander he is. He'd rather lose and have it be interesting, something that seems to be indicated as consistent by Odysseus's line after the move is made. Those are the primary things we can take away from this chess game, and it's all to really set up Lelouch and Schneisel as equals, foils, and as the final combatants. And in that regard, I love it. I don't care about the illegal chess move because it's so clearly being done for a dramatic point. But there is something about the chess match that does bother me, and maybe it explains why people do care about the illegal move. In the aftermath of both players moving their kings forward for the first time, we see the board state, which is clearly in Schneisel's favor, up a knight and 3 pawns. Yet we hear the audience state that it's an even match. That's just blatantly false. I'm no chess master, but even I can tell that Schneisel, at this late point in the game, should clearly be in the driver's seat and that no one watching has any idea what they're talking about. I'm not even speaking to the lack of consistency with the board. I'm not about to try and determine whether this point in time could lead to this point, or the fact that this board state doesn't match this one, because those are really small things that won't be picked up by the average viewer. But saying they're evenly matched in this game state is a clear indication that Code Geass is ignoring the game logic in favor of what would be preferable to the story. And specifically in this case, I think that's just lazy, because there's nothing preventing them from creating an even board state that would lead to threefold repetition, at least not thematically speaking. But whatever, if you're like me and you don't really follow chess, that moment happens so quickly you might not even be able to tell. But what if you do really care about chess? Would a fictional work messing up basic knowledge about the game you love get under your skin? I think it would. And by extrapolating that, the thematic value of the illegal move probably is irrelevant due to the blatant disregard for the rules. Since chess has been treated like our real-world version up to this point, we'd expect it to be consistent with the chess we know. There's no reason for the audience to assume that there are any version differences or alternate rules, which would create a new internal constant for the story. Because of the thematic point it makes, I chalk it up as artistic license. But I can understand why for some this would ruin their suspension of disbelief as we suddenly shift from external, the real-world chess logic, to internal, Code Geass chess logic. But I also don't think the team behind Code Geass had much of a choice, assuming they wanted to make the points they did at this extremely pressing moment in the show, as we can find by just interrogating what we could change to make it all stick. And the reality is, I don't have a great fix. Because there's no way to have a king checkmate another king in chess, and removing that removes most of the thematic value, because the commanders themselves need to be at risk. The easiest solution is to establish earlier in the show that in this universe, kings are actually taken. Game doesn't simply end at checkmate, but rather the actual action of knocking down the king. Something that would thematically make sense given the state of the world and the Emperor's ideology. And that there's nothing illegal about the move Schneisel made. It could have been done with Mao to show how overwhelming mind reading is as an ability. In this way, we establish the difference between the real-world version of chess and this universe's. The alternate solution is to change out the game entirely, but then we lose all of the easily accessible chess motifs and imagery. Because we don't want to do that, that'd be an even more massive change to the narrative, we can't swap chess out for a game that fulfills a similar role in a different story, like Gungi in Hunter x Hunter. In Gungi, we similarly take the show's word that the played moves and strategies are all brilliant. The main difference being that we can actually see the game board, watch the characters make moves, and never doubt that the rules are being followed because we don't understand the game. This is useful because no audience member could possibly know anything about the quality of the gameplay or closeness to the rules. Meaning that until Hunter x Hunter explains Gungi, we're left to focus entirely on the thematics of the game and the characters playing it. There's zero way to have your suspension of disbelief broken by the game itself because it's operating under internal Hunter x Hunter world logic. That's unfortunately not the case for chess, nor would it be for shogi or go or any other number of real-world strategy games. The team behind Code Geass probably recognized their limitations since they were using a real-world game, and that's why they minimized their chess moments as much as possible, in addition to having their focus squarely on all of the elements we spoke about earlier. Again, I don't feel like a solution to this problem is really necessary, but trying to find out, I think, illuminates why there wasn't a simple answer that the team went down. In all likelihood, this was the best of a bad situation, because any real solution that maintains the thematic qualities either needed to be implemented far earlier or would require a complete reworking of the show from the cellular level. At the end of the day, I still value the thematic elements of the illegal move over the specific rule violation, especially since the in-world audience acknowledges that the move is completely ridiculous and no one treats it like it's the norm. More evidence that it's a dramatic choice. But the board state example, I think, perfectly encapsulates Code Geass's focus on chess, to use its visual language and strategic shorthand without actually implementing the game itself. From an artistic license perspective, when we're taking elements that exist in the real world, we need to make sure that we're changing them enough to create a new internal logic that then needs to be adhered to, or accepting that for a non-zero percentage of people, this will ruin their immersion because it's just been too heavily ingrained. Flaws like this are a part of why Code Geass is so controversial, and stuff like this certainly makes it a worse experience for those who aren't enraptured by the show. But for those that love it, it's an inseparable part of what makes Code Geass so special. That singular and all-important focus on story and character drama above all else, and frankly, I wouldn't change a thing about it.